Hi everyone, it's Elizabeth, and we are not that many days away from the end of 2017. I don't think I achieved any of my 2017 goals. However, it was still a very big year for me. I moved across the country, I got engaged in June and married in October. I quit my job, got a job, lost that job, and waiting for another job, and I read a lot of books. This video is going to be my best of 2017 books. That doesn't mean that they came out in 2017. Oh no, it just means that I read them in 2017. I'm going to try to make this very brief because I have a habit of making long videos. My apologies. None of these are going to be in any particular order. I kind of just picked them off my shelves and went by what I remember being very poignant. The first book that I want to talk about is Silence by Shusaku Endo. And this one got on my radar because of the movie by Martin Scorsese, and also because ever since I spent time overseas with friends who were Christian, or some of them missionaries, I have been very fascinated by this idea of what it means to be a missionary in another country, just because there's a lot of cross-cultural things going on, and if you're not careful, what you're going to communicate to people about Christianity is not what Christianity is, but rather what your culture's version of Christianity is. I think that was pretty much handled very well in Silence. Silence is the story of two Portuguese priests who are coming to a closed Japan. Japan had previously been open to missionaries. There had previously been a flourishing Christian community there, but the government was sort of like, nah, and shut that down for very political and practical reasons, honestly. And it was an interesting meditation on what Christianity would have to do to survive in Japan. Could it survive in Japan? But also, it was a meditation on the importance of the individual as a missionary. Can God move beyond you and your abilities to bring people to Christ? Now, I personally think God's God and he's going to do whatever he wants, so you can help. You're an individual. He wants you to be there, but also he's God. He's way bigger than you and your very flawed efforts. Now, the thing about this, of course, my cat's here, my apologies. The thing about this is that the main character is a priest. There are things that only priests can do within the denomination of Catholicism. And so he felt a very heavy burden for the people there and their souls that I don't necessarily think he should have felt, but I'm also a Protestant, so there you go. But at the same time, I thought that this was a very well-written book. I would have been more interested to read more about what Christianity looks like in Japan, as opposed to what Christianity looks like to this Portuguese priest who is in Japan. But I also think that the overall message at the end of God being bigger than you was excellent. The next book that I want to talk about is American Nations, A History of the 11 Rival Regional Cultures of North America by Colin, Woodard. And I honestly don't remember if I read this in 2017 or not, but I believe I did. I must have finished it like around January or late December. Anyway, I love this book. This was given to me by my husband, and it has been one of the most enlightening books about the cultures of North America that I've ever read. Especially, it's been interesting to move to West Virginia because while I spent the last 10 years of my life in Oklahoma, my family is from the greater Appalachia area, kind of, and the culture that my husband grew up in is pretty similar to the culture that I grew up in. So even though I'm from Oklahoma, technically, I'm a lot more from this area. So it's been an interesting kind of transition. And I thought that this was an excellent book that kind of sheds some light on the different areas of the country that I've lived in. And also just the cultural motivations that go behind them that are also still influencing the way that we see things today. So I would highly recommend this book. I Justin got me the print version. I actually listened to it on tape with him. My cat is trying to mess with my computer right now. And it's been an excellent book that I keep going back to, so I highly recommend this one. Third book I want to talk about is one that I've already spoken about, Doomsday Book by Connie Willis. Like I said before, I'm not going to go very deep into this because I've already talked about it, but like I said before, it is a slow start but a very rewarding read. I feel like it did a very good job of discussing just horror and grief and what you have to do to go through it, and also just the importance of being there for other people as they go through these things. So I really recommend this. Also, like, let's just be real. The idea of a historian going back in time to do historical research is kind of my jam. So I really enjoyed this. I would recommend it. The fourth book I want to talk about is The Boy in the Striped Pyjamas by John Boyne. I assume that's how you say his name. I'm so sorry. And illustrated by Oliver Jeffers. Now, the original was not illustrated. I don't actually necessarily like the story itself. It's a pretty highly juvenilized version of the Holocaust and kind of something that has already been done multiple times. So my favorite is always going to be The Book Thief, but this one was pretty good. But the reason that I'm talking about this one is because Oliver Jeffers is one of my very favorite illustrators. I love Oliver Jeffers. I think his illustrations are fabulous. He says so much in his illustrations that you don't have to read. You can read it, but his illustrations just add so much to the story. So, for example, there is the penultimate scene where they're having dinner with a young Nazi general, and you can see that his temper is rising. And then, spoilers, immediately afterwards is this haunting illustration that I also think is a very, very good illustration of human rage and hatred. So I really, really love this version of this book. I'm keeping it for the illustrations alone, and I would definitely recommend The Boy in the Striped Pyjamas as illustrated by Oliver Jeffers. Alright, the fifth book I'm going to talk about is this one. I talked about it in one of my very first videos, The Making the Atomic Bomb by Richard Rhodes. I am talking about this because this is huge, and I finished it, and I got so much out of it. It is probably one of the most comprehensive histories that I've ever read involving World War II. I really, really loved it. There was a lot of really great things about it, especially there was this whole section at the end where they discuss the fallout of the nuclear attack and the eyewitness accounts in Japan of just everything that happened there. I thought this was phenomenal. I would recommend it to anyone who has an interest in World War II. I'd also recommend the audiobook. The audiobook was done very well, and it's the reason I finished this, because I had a lot of long road trips this summer, and I basically just chugged my way through this, and I thought it was fabulous. So, The Making the Atomic Bomb by Richard Rhodes. I recommend this to anybody and everybody who's interested in World War II history. Very briefly, I'm going to talk about two other books I've already mentioned. One of them is the Bonhoeffer biography by Eric Metaxas. You can see the cover here. I loved it. I thought that it was a very comprehensive history of a man's life, and also the history of his thought process and things. I thought it was a very interesting look into what the church was doing during World War II, especially in Germany. While I didn't agree with everything that Bonhoeffer ever said or did, I still really got a lot out of it, and it was a very edifying book for me. The second book that I really loved was At Home in the World, and it was by Tish Oxenrider. And again, you can see the cover here. It was a wonderful, inspiring book about taking your family and going outside of your comfort zone and traveling all over the world. That was really, really lovely. So yeah, so those are my top books of 2017. I would love to hear what books you really enjoyed reading this year. What are the things that really stuck with you? What are the books that you're still kind of like, you see it on your shelf and you're like, oh yeah, that was really good. Let me know in the comments below, and everybody have a Merry Christmas. Bye!